Look at this build-up footage. It might seem like the three center backs are forming a diamond with the keeper. However, if you closely look at this, those three center backs are actually the three midfielders. So, where are the center backs? If we fast forward the clip a little bit, look at these two players running with the strikers. You got it right. Now see this attacking footage of Inter. If we rewind that again, the player who made the cross and the player who received it inside the box are once again the center backs. So what exactly is going on? This is the strange tactics of Inzaghi's Inter Milan. From having false attackers to false defenders, each player in his tactics are capable of acting anyone, and using this they completely dismantle the opposition with their unpredictability. And when you see his counter-pressing system, the same center backs become the first line of defense right after losing the ball. So what exactly is these strange tactics of Inzaghi's Inter, and why and how he's able to use his center backs as attackers? Let's understand in this video. When you think of tactics where players break free from their traditional positions, you usually expect them to be part of a relationist team where they roam randomly without any formations. However, with Inzaghi's Inter, they are actually a positionist side but with a relationist mentality. To understand this, with most positionist teams, you'll often notice players rotating within specific areas they are comfortable with. And these rotations are usually predictable and safe, ensuring players stay within their zones while performing these movements. However, with Inzaghi's Inter, they maintain specific playing structures for each phase of the game, but the players actually in it are completely random to each other. As in terms of rotations, you'll see players interchanging positions in almost any areas of the pitch, irrespective of their comfort zones. For instance, when you look at their build-up shape, when playing against a low-pressing team that doesn't engage with the backline, you'll often notice the midfielders dropping deep towards the keeper to receive the ball. And by doing this, the midfield joins the backline and triggers the opposition's front line to track this overload, which then creates open space behind the pressers. So to exploit this, you would see the center backs making advancing runs into the space and receive the ball from the midfielders. So like this, instead of making single-player rotations, Inzaghi lets his entire horizontal lines to interchange with one another and manipulate the opposition's lines to create large spaces from it. Also, due to the advancing movements of the center backs, it forces the opposition to stay away from the ball carrier and mark these incoming runners. So this frees up the midfielders with more space and time to use their vision and creativity to play accurate direct passes from deeper positions, which was really not the case with traditional formations. However, if the opposition remains too rigid and takes the risk of staying zonal, then these horizontal rotations may not be enough to break their structure. So in such scenario, Inter does this. The final player you're looking at is actually a center back, but how exactly did he get there? To understand this, when he ran with the ball at first, the advanced midfielder dropped deep to receive the pass, pulling the second line with him. This created a space behind the pressing players, which the center back targeted with his run to receive a return pass. And as soon as he received it, the advancing striker also dropped deep, pulling the last defensive line further with him. So this left the center back with a clear space behind the back line, allowing him to receive the final pass with almost no one in front of him. Like this, you would often see the center backs making straight runs into the backline, while the midfielders and strikers drop deep to create space for him. However, if the opposition recognizes this and still sticks to their zonal positions, it would become harder for the center back to find space to attack, often forcing Inter to pass the ball back. But this is where Inzaghi's strategy becomes even more interesting, as when they revert deep, you'll notice the center back still staying forward. The reason for this is that with fewer players in the backline, it opens up a huge space behind for the opposition to counter. So this triggers their desire to win the ball back to exploit that space. Also, with the center back still near the backline, Inter creates a numerical overload up front. So as the opposition grows impatient and moves forward, Inter quickly starts their second attempt, where they use the opposition's press as bait to create space behind and use their front overload to find an extra man to get forward. So like this, Inter has a squad full of versatile players capable of adapting to any role. And to develop this level of flexibility, it often takes months or even years of physical and mental training for players to gain confidence in multiple positions. However, to make this process more efficient, one modern way that top footballers are training themselves is with Be Your Best, a football training app in virtual reality. With Be Your Best, players can immerse themselves in realistic game situations and help them to become familiar with different roles and positions. For instance, a center back can train as a striker, or a midfielder can practice as a fullback. And this is all in a virtual environment without any physical load. And due to this, even Real Madrid's midfielder Tchouaméni uses this technology to practice and adapt to playing as a center back. And the best part is that you can train right from home with over 800 real-life scenarios designed to sharpen key skills like scanning, vision, and decision-making. So if you want to become a more calm and composed player on the pitch, then head to beyourbest.com and use my code DK20 to get a discount of 20% on your first month or first year subscription. So just go to beyourbest.com to get started, and the link is also in the description. Also, a big thanks to Be Your Best for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the tactics. However, when playing against high-pressing sides that take the risk of going man-to-man, there's a really high chance of losing the ball in critical areas with these rotations. So in such cases, Inzaghi completely turns off his previous tactics and skips the build-up entirely. And to achieve that, he intentionally instructs his midfielders and wingbacks to stay deep and create a deep overload, while forcing the high-pressing opposition to press even higher. So using this, they patiently pass the ball around the backline until a visible space is created between the second and last line, and then they swiftly play a direct long ball into that space to exploit it. And after getting into the attacking half, when you look at their final third shape, instead of compressing the opposition with a high defensive line, Inzaghi does the opposite, where he encourages the opposition to play a high line. For instance, when the ball is with a midfielder, you would see him and his partners moving back and passing it towards the keeper. This makes the opposition play a high line and pulls their first half forward, which then creates space between the lines and behind their defense for the center backs or the forwards to exploit. However, if the opposition prefers to stick to their zonal positions and block the central spaces, then it forces Inter to attack from the flanks using their wingbacks. But with no wingers in the formation, you might wonder, who is this extra player rotating with the wingback? It's the center back again. As with the absence of a wide forward, the wingback often lacks support and gets outnumbered by markers. So Inzaghi instructs his wide center backs to act as extra fullbacks, who would usually support the wingback by making overlapping or underlapping runs and distract the markers around them. However, if the opposition counters this overload by sending more numbers, then it would be difficult to progress through the flanks. So in such cases, just like the oppositions, they send more numbers towards one side of the pitch, where you'll see strikers, midfielders, and even the opposite wingback inverting to overload that side. So this invites the opposition to tilt their shape even more. And as soon as they shifts to one side, the player with the ball makes a surprising reverse pass to the opposite side. However, with all the players on one side, who actually receive that? This is again where Inzaghi's wide center-back come into play. As with the opposition is preoccupied with marking the attackers and turned their entire attention on one side, the far-sided center-back quietly makes the opposite run towards the no-man area and receives the diagonal ball with ample space and time to play a dangerous cross into the box. And to take further advantage of this, you may also see the far-sided center-back advancing and getting inside the box for the cross. So like this, you'll often witness unusual moments where one center-back is crossing towards another one inside the box. Whenever a team loses the ball in the final third, you typically see the attackers acting as the first line of defense to recover possession. However, due to their lack of ball-winning abilities, the opposition could easily bypass them and get into the attacking half. But when we look at the counter-pressing of Inter, that first presser is again the center-back. As after losing the ball, instead of running back to their original positions, the center-backs instantly press the ball carrier and use their excellent ball-winning ability to win back possession within the attacking half. This makes it extremely difficult for the opposition to bypass them, and often halts counterattacks before they can reach the attacking half. But during the opposition's build-up, Inter finally retreats back to their normal 5-3-2 shape. And instead of playing a high defensive line, they don't really press the back line, and prefer to stay in a mid-block, where both the forwards drop deep to closely cover the opposition's pivot. So this effectively blocks all the central passing lanes for the opposition's backline to play through. However, due to the narrowness of the shape, it completely frees up the opposition's fullbacks to receive the ball and advance toward the backline. So to counter this, instead of the wingback stepping up, the ball-sided center mid would drift wide and cover that space, while his position is then taken by an advancing center back or the pivot. The reason for not sending the wing-back forward is that if the opposition manages to pass the ball to the winger, the center-back would have to cover him. And since most center-backs are generally slower than full-backs, they can easily be outpaced and outplayed by the winger's speed and dribbling. So having a natural fullback in these situations provides a better defensive balance, ensuring the right players are in the right positions to deal with these threats. However, with the center mid drifting wide to cover the full back, it can leave a gap in the central areas, and if the center back or pivot fails to step up in time, the opposition could exploit this by quickly passing it to the unmarked player and eventually break them centrally. So to address this scenario, you'll occasionally see the wide center back step up to directly press the opposition's fullback, while the rest of the back line shifts to cover his position. This ensures the midfielders remain intact centrally, forcing them to advance through the flanks. And when they actually advances through the flanks, instead of tilting the entire back five toward one side, Inzaghi turns it into a back six. For instance, except for the wing-back and ball-sided defender, the rest of the backline stays inside the box to track the opposition forwards and maintain a central overload against crosses. So to cover the gap between the two, the pivot often drops deep as an extra center-back, while his position is covered by one of the forwards. And when they win the ball back using this, you'll often see 4 or 5 players rapidly pushing forward to counterattack, regardless of their actual positions, where they usually drive the ball wide and deliver early crosses into the box before even reaching the final third. The reason for this is with the opposition's defense is still retreating back and not yet fully organized, delivering an early cross could be detrimental and exposes their weakness. And to take further advantage of this, instead of running narrowly, Inter's forwards spread out wide and target the backside of the opposition, which acts as a blind spot for defenders. So this makes it difficult for the opposition to track their movements and force them to decide whether to follow the forwards or focus on the crosser. Along with the wide center-backs advancing, you will also see the middle one pushing into the final third, especially looking for crosses from the wing-backs. So all 3 center-backs can be like liberos, where their primary focus is to exploit the spaces created by the upper players and drive the ball straight into the final third. And this role has also turned them into some of the rarest assist-making center-backs in Europe. Meanwhile, both wingbacks play an incredibly versatile role for Inter. Aside from staying wide and delivering crosses into the box, they drift inside to pull the opposition's fullbacks narrower to create space for the wide center back, and also interchange positions with them when they advances through the center. In terms of the midfielders, Çalhanoğlu has mastered the role of deep-lying playmaker. However, before Inzaghi, he was primarily played as a number 10, who mostly engaged in the final third alongside the wingers and forwards. But after joining Inter, he's proven to be even more effective playing from deeper positions. And with Inzaghi's system of advancing center-backs, he gets more time and space on the ball to deliver creative passes from a variety of angles, making him one of the best modern playmakers. Speaking about playmakers, instead of playing number 10, Inzaghi deploys 2 number 8s that stay slightly deeper and act as roaming playmakers. And due to their deeper positions, the opposition's second line is often forced to stay up and track them, which then increases the gap between the defensive and midfield lines. So up front, out of the 2 strikers, one would act as a deep-lying forward, who usually drops deep into that space and links the midfield with the attack, while the other one plays more as a target man, who pushes the backline deeper to create space for Martinez to exploit. In terms of the mentality, Inzaghi always prioritizes getting into the final third as quickly as possible, as they don't aim to dominate possession but rather use it as a tool to create constant scoring opportunities, so this makes their play quite attacking. And to complement that, they also play a really high tempo, where they constantly look out for space to pass and bait the opposition with their irregular player movements. While in terms of creative freedom, Inzaghi applies relational approaches into his positional structure, so he encourages his players to get out of their comfort zones and occupy random positions to create space. While in defense, unlike normal teams, Inzaghi's Inter approaches the final third with a mid-block and encourages the opposition to push higher, so they can target the space behind the lines to play through. In the final third, Inter prefers early crosses to prevent the opposition from settling into their defensive shape, and also uses through balls to play into the spaces created by the incoming pressers. So overall, when you witness tactics like Inzaghi's Inter Milan, it truly marks a new revolution in attacking football. A revolution where instead of solely relying on actual playmakers to create opportunities, almost every player in the formation now takes on the role of a playmaker. And this is only possible when you have players who can trust each other's rotations and have the ability to take on that responsibility, which is exactly what Inter has. And with more managers shifting their style towards relationism, if we travel from Italy all the way to Spain, there's a famous club that was once known for its tiki-taka and total football, but has now suddenly turned into a relational side that thrives on risky passes and an intense gegenpressing. So what exactly is the tactical revolution happening at Barcelona? And why are Barcelona slowly moving away from their traditional tiki-taka? Let's find out by clicking this video. Hope to see you there.